Tuesday last week, France's Prime Minister François Bayrou decided on a radical new way to explain France's debt problem, making a YouTube channel.
Bonjour à tous.
In his first 8-minute video, he lays out the crisis. France is racking up 5,000 euros in new debt every second. He warns of upcoming spending cuts, compares French retirement to the rest of Europe, and says more videos are coming to break down his budget plan.
Semaines qui viennent.
It's a clever and kind of a funny way to explain tough budget cuts and might even help people feel the government is being more transparent. We just hope he doesn't take away all of our EU Made Simple views. But is he right? Is France's debt problem really that bad? The short answer is yes. The longer answer, it's complicated. So in this video, we'll look at how bad the problem really is, how we got here, and what the way out might be. And yes, there is the real possibility, even though it's kind of small, that EU member states, especially Germany, may have to help France out. So, how bad are things today? The current French GDP as of 2024 is 2.9 trillion euros. Its debt is 3.3 trillion euros, which amounts to approximately 113% of debt to GDP ratio. To give you an idea of how bad this really is, Germany, known for being very fiscally responsible, has a debt to GDP ratio of 65.3%. And Greece, which was the biggest victim of the financial crash, has the highest debt to GDP ratio in the EU, at 158%. And the least debt to GDP goes to Estonia, with 24.5%. France is near the top when it comes to government debt, and that has a cost. Last year alone, France paid a staggering 44.5 billion euros in interest, or approximately 15% of all government spending. That's pretty rough. But the worst part, that number could go so much higher. And here's why. Governments borrow money by selling something called bonds. Investors give the government money now, and the government promises to pay it back later, but with interest. And eventually those bonds too have to be repaid. And in France's case, about 20% of its long-term debt, 682 billion euros, needs to be paid back in the next 3 years. Usually, that's fine and completely manageable. The government simply borrows new money to replace the old. But now, interest rates are way up. And that means France will have to borrow at higher rates. And that could squeeze the budget, and might even force more borrowing just to keep up, resulting in a pretty bad debt spiral. And things are already pretty bad today. Right now, French government bonds, called OETs, have interest rates of 2.7% for 5 years, 3.3% for 10 years, and 4.1% for 30 years. Compare that to Germany's rates of 2.2%, 2.6%, and 3.1%, and you can really start seeing the problem. And it doesn't stop here. Let's take a deeper look at why French interest rates are so high and why analysts think they might go even higher. France has basically been running deficits almost non-stop since the 1980s. Spending stayed high, not just because of emergencies, but because of the size of the state itself. Pensions, healthcare, welfare, education, and a big public workforce. By 2000, debt climbed from around 21% of GDP to over 60%. And then came 2008. France bailed out its banks and boosted the economy, but unlike others, it didn't scale back afterwards. Debt rose to 90% and stayed there. Then COVID pushed things even further. Emergency spending drove debt to 115%. And since then, inflation, war, and political gridlock have kept spending high and reform almost impossible. And in this year, 2025, interest costs alone are set to hit 55 billion euros, over 2% of French GDP, similar to France's entire defense budget. But the deeper issue here is structural. Most of the budget is locked in pensions and social spending. Nearly a quarter of state spending goes to pensions alone. And reforming that is politically explosive. Credit agencies like the S&P have downgraded its rating, warning that French debt is getting riskier. At the same time, there's very little appetite for spending cuts or tax reform throughout the country. The parliament is so fragmented, and the public is wary of austerity. I mean, they can't even pass budgets. Instead, Macron's government has been using Article 49.3, a constitutional workaround that skips a full vote in parliament. It gets things done, but it makes the country look very politically unstable. And the result is that the investors lose confidence and demand higher interest rates once again, which pushes up France's borrowing costs to an unmanageable level. France's main political blocs do have some ideas how to fix this issue though. Macron's camp wants to bring the deficit down from 5.8% to 3% by 2029. This means that France is currently spending 5.8% more than it earns each year, and they want to shrink that gap, which is quite understandable. Their plan is a 60 billion euro adjustment next year. That includes 44 billion euros in tax hikes on big companies and wealthy households, plus spending cuts like freezing pensions and public sector pay. They also want to introduce zero-based budgeting, where ministries have to justify every euro they spend. The left-wing New Popular Front, or in particular France Insoumise, wants the complete opposite. No cuts, just more public investment. They argue that austerity kills growth and propose indexing wages and pensions to inflation, freezing essential prices, and raising taxes on the rich and big corporations to fund it all. And then there's Marine Le Pen's National Rally, who also rejects austerity, but isn't backing big spending either. They focus more on cutting VAT on fuel and energy, and say they'll fund it by slashing immigration costs and reducing EU payments, and also removing some corporate tax perks. So, everyone claims they can fix the deficit, but the real fight is over how and who pays for it. The most likely scenario here is that a compromise will be reached and that France is able to figure this out on its own. But let's also have a look at what happens if it can't or doesn't. Because with a deficit stuck at a staggering 5.8% and ongoing political deadlock, there may be a small chance that outside help is needed. In that case, the European Central Bank could step in. And indirectly, so would all EU member states, especially the most cash-rich among them, Germany. The ECB and the EU have a few tools to help, like bond buying programs, where the ECB steps in to purchase French government bonds, helping to keep interest rates low. It used this exact tool for Italy back in 2022, under something called the Transmission Protection Instrument. And then there's shared EU debt, where the EU issues joint debt like it did during the COVID crisis. Or finally, rescue funds. In a worst-case scenario, France could request a bailout through the European Stability Mechanism, or in short, ESM. But of course, none of this support comes for free. It typically requires governments to commit to very strict reforms and tough spending controls. Think Greece in 2008. That said though, France is a wealthy country with plenty of tools to bring down its deficit, so a full-blown bailout scenario remains very, very unlikely. Here's what I think. Bayrou is right to sound the alarm. With a deficit of above 5%, France's debt is spiraling out of control. The country has overspent and now needs to face the consequences. That means cutting public spending. And there are really only two options available. Option 1. France acts now and takes responsibility. Yes, it will be painful in the short term, but at least it stays in control, without outside pressure. Or option 2. Let things get worse, and the European Central Bank may have to step in, which indirectly means German involvement. And if that happens, support would almost certainly come with super strict austerity conditions. And to be honest, I do kind of understand the German mindset here. They've been super careful not to overspend. And if, obviously a big if, they're asked to help out an overspending neighbor, it wouldn't exactly be fair, would it? But at the same time, we do need to zoom out a little. Europe has to think bigger and act together. We should start by taxing foreign companies, especially big tech, that profit massively from the EU single market while contributing very little. And EU countries can also lower their national spending by pooling resources together with their partners. A common European army, for example, a joint pension framework, or coordinated tech investments. And if France does finally get its debt under control, we could finally shift our focus to building a true capital markets union, where we can issue shared EU debt and unlock the financial firepower to make Europe a real heavyweight on the global stage. Now, if you want to learn more about the Capital Markets Union and how it can make Europe super competitive on the global stage, make sure you watch this video here. Or if you want to know more about immigration and the Danish approach to tackle it, click this video here. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to support us further, consider joining us on Patreon. And as always, thanks to our presidents, Jan Schauke, Christian Peter, AGVD, Daniel Unite Europe, Stefan and Rashid. You guys rock.